right away, but I'm going to have Mike come up as I introduce him. So Mike Lafolette, he's a very new member to Missouri FSA. All right, I joke for a minute. He started in 1977. He looks really young, but he's been with Missouri FSA for a long period of time. Originally from Mercer County, Missouri, grain dairy farm there in Mercer County. I think he might still do a little bit of work related to production agriculture. He's been in the state office for over 25 years now. Now, I've had the opportunity to be around the country doing presentations and working with a lot of state FSA folks. I want you to know how lucky we are to have Mike here in Missouri. And why do I say that? Talking about regulations of a new farm bill, I sometimes go, that's just about like watching paint dry, right? It's tough. It's in the details. It's a lot of detailed information. It's very critical that you pay attention to the regulations that Mike is going to talk about. He does it in a way where I go, it's not like paint drying, all right? It's really good in terms of the information he's going to provide to you. So he is one of the best that I've seen as I've gone around the country working with a lot of different FSA offices. I just want to make sure that you understand how lucky we are here in Missouri to have Mike on board. So Mike, please help me welcome.
Thanks, Scott. Put a little pressure on there, I think. I hope we can live up to that expectation. Appreciate being here today, though, and an opportunity to visit with all you folks. And I'm up here representing FSA, but definitely this is a group effort. Can everybody hear me okay? I get kind of excited when I get up here and I got this handheld mic, and I may start waving my arms, and then you can't hear me, right? So keep in mind, if you can't hear me, just kind of wave, and I'll try to get the microphone back up. Do appreciate being here today, though. FSA is here. We've got the program procedure, the policy. We want to roll that out for you. This is an education process, believe me. There's different stages. There's really 3 different stages in this process with the new Farm Bill. We're going to discuss those. It's important. We understand the complexity. It's very complicated, but don't let it overwhelm you. You're going to go through these steps, and we're going to get you everything you need to do, but it's going to take time. And actually, this process is going to run all the way through this next summer. And we're going to be this next summer, the summer of 2015, we're going to be signing you up for both 2014 and 2015 program years. But you've got some decisions to make before you get to that. It's a process. It really is. It's a puzzle. The pieces do fit together, even though you may not think they do when you leave here today. I hopefully will get you closer to that, though. Complicated process. If we can get the pieces to fit together, it'll help you start understanding where you need to go. I wish I could tell you that you're going to leave this room today and know exactly what you need to do on your farms to participate, what the best options are. And hopefully you'll have a better understanding, but certainly there's going to be a lot more information you need to absorb. The university people, FAPRI, Extension, everybody is here to help you in that process, not make a decision for you, but provide you with the best information available to help you make the decision that you think is best. You're going to make decisions right now over the next few months that you're going to be locked into for the life of the Farm Bill through 2018. Those will be irrevocable decisions about the options that we're going to talk about. So take careful attention. We're going to throw a lot of information at you, and I got to keep moving. I'm the guy usually responsible for putting this whole program behind by about a half hour, all right? So I'm going to get going here and talk to you about it. The big change that most producers are going to see when they compare this Farm Bill to the last Farm Bill, the initial thing they're going to see is direct payments are gone. First thing you need to understand, before on our programs, typically you could come in, sign up, and we would tell you very close, I mean almost exactly the dollar amount you would earn on your farm. direct payment was guaranteed. All you had to do was sign a contract. A lot of times, $20, $30 an acre, you knew how much money was coming and when it was coming. That is gone. The direct payments, the guaranteed payments are gone. What we now have are payments that are price and or revenue driven. When I say revenue, I'm talking about a combination of yield and price. All right? You think, okay, well that's money, I want that money. You really don't want the money. All right? That means you got low prices and or low yield. This is just like insurance. Okay? You insure your house, you don't want it to burn down, right? Well, there might be a few exceptions to that one. But regardless, this is insurance that you want. There is no premium for this insurance. You want to participate and cover the risk involved in low prices and low yield. No premium involved. Just come to the office, get the information you need, make the best decision you can. But in the end, if nothing is paid, and maybe you wouldn't receive a payment all the way through 2018, that's a good thing. Okay, that means you've had good prices and good yield. Now, realistically, have the prices been good in 2014? They have not. So you're already looking at an insurance loss probably for 2014. Again, a real good incentive to get in, get decisions made, get signed up because of the low prices. Are the prices going to remain low through 2018? Some of the projections are saying that. So again, this may be money you get paid every year. You don't want to anticipate that payment, but believe me, it's just like insurance. If that loss is there, you'll be glad you had the insurance. That's what insurance is. You're glad it's there if you need it. Now, in this process, some new things. We're going to let you reallocate bases, potentially, and build yields. The reallocation of bases, I'm just going to say this real quick. You can't build base on a farm. If you've got 100 acres of total base on your farm, when you get done, you're still only going to have 100 acres of total base. It's a reallocation process. Based on plantings, 2009 through 2012, you can move bases between crops based on that planting percentage, and we'll go through some examples of that. The yield option is you will have an opportunity to prove yield. Really just certified to them. The yield certification will only be used for the PLC program, and this maybe will make more sense as we go through some examples and talk about it a little bit. But right now your farm has bases and there's yields assigned to those farms. They're called countercyclical yields, direct and countercyclical yield. They probably don't represent the yields that you currently grow on your farm. If you look at those, a lot of them may be in a 90 bushel range, for example. Some of them, depending on the county where you're at, 70, 80, 90, 100 bushel yield. Your farm, you may be capable of growing 150, 180, 200 bushel corn. We've always had complaints about our yields being low, and they were frozen. This is an opportunity to prove your yield. Now, even though they can only be used with the PLC program, you may decide, well, I don't want them. After you review all this information, you say, well, I'm not interested in PLC. You still need to prove your yield, okay? How will you know if PLC is your best option? If that's the program that could use these higher yields, right now you've got a 90 bushel corn yield on your farm. You can prove that it's 180 based on that average. Would you rather have a 180 bushel yield or a 90 bushel yield? You want the 180, right? Now, if you plug the 180 into these computations, now all of a sudden the PLC program that would use that looks much better. It's going to pay at the 180 bushel yield. So if you don't certify your yield and see what those are, you really can't do the comparison between these three different options that we're going to talk about. Okay, even at the end you say, well, I don't want PLC. That's not what I want. Fine, we're not going to use that yield for payment purposes, but it still goes in your farm record. It's going to replace the 90 bushel yield, even if you don't use it for that PLC program. What's gonna happen when the next farm bill rolls around, 2019? I don't know either. But it could use that yield, right? It's not gonna hurt a thing to have that higher yield sitting in your farm record. Just have it in your back pocket in case it is used down the road. All right, here's our options. ARC, Agricultural Risk Coverage. You got two options there. You got an ARC County and an ARC IC, that's ARC Individual Coverage. Very, very different options. ARC County is county level. It's all driven by the yields that are in the county where the farm is administratively carried. Okay, where the farm is administratively carried. These options are by farm number, by FSA farm number. So, the administrative county, each county would potentially have a different average yield, different guarantees depending on the county you're in. Your payments then are based on revenue. It's both price and yield driven, but it's the county yield. The prices used in all of these options is an average market price, a 12-month after market price. So they're consistent. All of them use that same price that's unknown until 12 months after harvest. The county option works the same way. But the county's yields, prior year's yields, will be used then to develop a guarantee. These average market prices in the prior years times the county yields in the prior years will show that county's guarantee. You get a percentage of that as a guarantee. So, then each year the county actual revenue is used to determine if there's a loss. All right, it has nothing to do with your own production. If you take the county, ARC County option, you don't have to turn in your yields at all. Doesn't make any difference. It doesn't even make any difference what crops you grow. The ARC County option is paid on the bases on the farm. You may have a corn base when this process gets done. You've got a corn base. You plant soybeans in 2015. The payment would be made if corn triggers, because that's the base you have. If corn prices and the corn yield in your county triggered, if the actual went below the guarantee, you get a payment on corn, not the beans that was planted, but the corn base on the farm. So that's important to understand as well. You don't have to turn in production records, and that decision is made by farm, whether or not you go ARC County, ARC County or PLC, by farm, by crop. So there's a lot of different choices there. The ARC IC is individual coverage. Completely different situation. Individual coverage, it is tailored to your own production, your own farm. Farm by farm, you can make that decision. We will use your prior year yields to develop basically a yield, a guarantee for that farm. Very similar to APHs, but we're not using 10-year where the data just stopped. So we're going to look at your own yield capability on a farm. That's with the ARC IC option. Then we're going to develop guarantees on what the crop is that's actually planted. That one does not get paid on the base acres, what your bases are. It is paid on what you plant. So again, completely opposite. See how simple this is? See how easy that they made this for us? All right, these two options are just mirror opposites of each other, basically. That PLC, very probably the most simple option. The law, the federal regs develop reference prices. Those are in the regs. They're a known amount. An example is $3.70 on corn, $5.50 on wheat, $8.40 on soybeans. Those are reference prices, and those are a known amount. With the PLC program, again, it has nothing to do with what you plant. It's paid on the bases on your farm. There's no production records required. Whatever bases you have, if the price, the actual marketing year average price, 12 months after harvest, that average, is below the reference price for the crop, the base you have on the farm, you get a payment. Okay? Didn't make any difference if you grew that crop or not. If that's your base and the prices drop below that reference price, you would receive a payment. It's on 85% of the base. Got nothing to do with your plant, no production record. One thing I'm going to mention real quick, there's a new insurance option, the SCO, supplemental coverage option. It is something that is part of the tools that we're going to use, that factory universities are using, and it's figured in as well. That insurance option is only available on the farms and the crops that take the PLC option. That's something to consider. That's an insurance option. You would pay a premium for that, but it kind of laps in and works with the PLC option for risk management. But it's something to consider. But the SCO is only available for those crops that you choose PLC on. All right, here's your covered commodities. 21 of them. Those, if you plant them, is what is considered a covered commodity. Not super important for the PLC and the ARC County options, but very important if you decide to go ARC IC. Remember, on the ARC IC, the individual coverage, your payments are triggered based on what you plant. That's the one that's different. They trigger on what you plant, not what your base is. So here's your covered commodities. This is what count. Everybody up here can pick out, you know, the ones that's common to this area. You got corn, soybeans, wheat, grain, sorghum, oats. There's other oil seeds, different things up there, and you may grow some. You know, we have seen canola and sunflowers and different ones grown as well. One thing that's not on here, I'm really not going to spend anything talking about it, is cotton. Cotton was dropped out as a covered commodity, and there's a big long explanation for that, but I'm not going to go into it right now. But that's the only change. These are the same covered commodities that we've had in the past. All right, we talked about, or I mentioned earlier, that this is a process. This is a three-step process. Reallocation of bases and updating yields, I've already talked about briefly. We're in that process now. That started September 29th. That runs through February 27th. There's a deadline to this first step. And we've started this step, and some producers are currently providing their certified yields to us. So understand, this is the first step that farms would have to go through to get to the next step. They have to be completed in this order. So February 27th is the first one. And I'm telling you, you want to update yields regardless of what else you do. Whether or not you reallocate bases or not, you want to update your yields. Don't miss this deadline on updating yield. All right, second step, the election. We talked just briefly, we'll talk more about ARC County, ARC IC, and PLC. Those are the elections. There's three options. Once you have decided if you want to update yields and or reallocate bases, you go to the second option. That will start November 17th and run through the end of March. So the first two options actually lap to a degree, but the first option ends before the second option ends. So be aware they have different deadlines. The deadline for the second one is the end of March. Then enrollment. So after those first two steps are done, then we're going to start sign-up. When I say enrollment, that's what I like to call sign-up. We do that every year. You're still going to have to do that every year. The first two options is a one-time shot. I want to make sure everybody understands that. You don't do the first two options every year. You get one shot at that. You're going to reallocate bases, potentially update yield. You're done. You're not going to do it again. Whatever you decide to do, you're locked in through 2018. Then you're going to pick by farm one of these three options. That's called the election. That's a one-time shot. Whatever you decide, you're locked in through 2018. But the enrollment, the sign-up, is something you have to come in and sign the contract each year to actually participate and be eligible for the payment each year. And that's really no different than what we've done. The big difference, because of the timing on this, on the enrollment, on the sign-up, we're going to do 2014 and 2015 at the same time. We're going to start that this next summer in 2015. See, we haven't signed anybody up for 2014 yet. There hadn't been a sign-up. So we're going to start the sign-up mid-April, 1st of May, and that's going to run through next summer. We don't have a deadline yet. I'm guessing sometime 1st of September, but that's just a guess. Don't have a firm deadline. You'll have to then sign up each year, but this first time you get to sign up for both years, 14 and 15. Okay. The ARC PLC, I already indicated we started that on this reallocation of bases and yield. It's going to run through February 27th. I think everybody's got that part down. I'm going to talk to you just a second about something that happened several months ago, actually the first week in August. I think everybody's getting the idea here that I'm up here to talk to you about policy and procedure and some rules. You've got some other speakers coming up, and they're going to talk to you from University and FAPRI and these tools. Those are the folks that can help you make decisions. Okay, should I reallocate my bases? Should I update my yields? And I'm going to tell you right now, that's a yes. You want to update your yield. All right, what option should I take? I got 5 farms. What option's best on that farm? What option's best on this farm? Those are the folks that are going to help you out. But they need information. The information that they need for you to tell them, all right, what's your current basis? What are your current yields? What's your planting history? What crops have you planted 2008 through 2012? That's information they're going to need. That's information that FSA mailed out first week in August. If you remember getting that letter, that is great. There was kind of a cover letter that was an explanation, a short one about the Farm Bill, and then there was this acreage history summary report. And what it showed you was your bases and yields, and then planting history, 08 through 2012, and it gives you an opportunity to review that. Certainly if you looked at it and thought there was mistakes, something was wrong, something was misreported, you need to go to your county office and see if there really is a problem. This is the time to straighten that out. That was the purpose of the letter, but not only that, that's your information sheet that you need to take with you if you're going to go visit one of the specialists, or even if you're not. You're going, okay, I'm pretty computer savvy, I can do this. I'm going to go to these websites and I'm going to fill it out. You still need this information. So you need to find these letters. If you can't find them, then you need to probably contact the county office. We should be able to get you another copy of that, okay? But look for it at home. If you're an owner or an operator of a farm, and that farm has bases, you should have received one of these letters. And that's your information that you're going to need. Now, in some cases, if you do find that, you may see that there's blanks in there, one or more of the year. Let's say you look at your letter, okay, I've got 2010, that acre report, that acre looks good, 11 looks good, 12 looks good, but 8 and 9 are blank. There's nothing there at all. In our process, when we administratively work with farms, we've got changes. We've got people buying farms, selling farms, we've got track splits, and bottom line, our computer, which is everything, of course, driven by a computer anymore, if it can't see a track number, if it looks back, in my example, let's say there was a reconstitution done. This is my farm, and I'm looking at this thing, and I think, well, I guess back in 2009 or 2010, I sold off part of that tract, and FSA did a reconstitution. Well, the tract numbers changed. The system can't see it. The computer couldn't see that acre report because the numbers weren't there anymore. It was a different number. So now you need to go to the office. We've been working on recovering that. It's a long process, a manual process of going back and pulling crop reports and manually figuring out what the acreage was on those parent tracts. So if you've got blanks, that probably means you need to go to the office and see what that information is on those prior years where the blanks are. All right, on the update, base options, you can retain the current base. That's option number one. Right now, that letter that you got will show you what those bases are. And that's a historical base. We've been able to make some changes in the past, certain farm bills. For the most part, though, the bases are really unchanged for a long time. Now, again, we're going to give you an opportunity to reallocate. Okay, option one is just keep what you got. But based on that planning history, again, on that letter, on that producer summary, whatever that is, there's a percentage that can be arrived where we can reallocate base. And we're going to go, I think probably the easiest thing is just to look at an example of that. Keep the base or reallocate, but remember, I'm talking about reallocating, not building. In the end, if you decide to reallocate, the base acres that you had to start with in total won't go up, it won't go down. You'll never wind up with more base. If you're currently on a grass farm that's got no bases, but maybe you tore it up and started planting it, which this happened a lot several years ago, but you started planting it in that 2009 through 2012 period, you're not going to be able to build base. If your farm currently doesn't have base, it won't have base when we get done. You can't reallocate zero. You have to have a base to start with. All right, let's look at an example then here just real quick. Here we've got a 160 acre farm. You got a 70 acre corn base, 70 acre soybean base, and I think it's a 20 acre oat base. That's not unusual. I mean, this farm, you got 160 acres, so it's really based up. That part really doesn't make any difference, but we've got several farms are based up. But this could be a 300 acre farm carrying a 160 acre base, wouldn't change the example. Okay, here you look at base reallocation 4 years. And again, just to make it more confusing, Congress decided to say yields are based on a 5-year average, 08 through 12. Base reallocation is a 4-year, 2009 through 2012. This gentleman on cropping history, again, he could look at his acreage history summary report. What he's done is he's planted 80 acres of corn and then flopped to 69.5 in 2010, back to 80. You can see that's a flop with the soybeans. And again, that's real common. It's not an all-in, all-out rotation, but he's rotating corn and beans on that farm between the fields. Very common. So, if you go to our website, you could actually, there's a tool there, or the university tools you can plug this into. This is actually a spreadsheet that's on our public website, FSA public website. I know some of those numbers get pretty small if you're in the back of the room. But you would plug in the base acres, again, this is on your letter. On the far left over there, you got corn, oats, and soybeans. That's the base acres. Then you're going to come across for each year. Remember that table on the previous slide? You're going to enter the planted acreage each year, 2009 through 2012. What that's going to do is it's going to give you a reallocation percentage. All right, the computer, the spreadsheet will figure that for you if you plug these acreages in. So you plug the corn acreage in, the soybean acreage in. If you look at the average planting, and that's what this is what the policy is. You add up all 4 years and then you divide by 4. And that's your average planting for each. Now, he was doing a rotation back and forth, so guess what? His average planting on the corn and the beans are the same, 74.75. That's going to get you a 50-50 reallocation percentage. He's planted the same. His option then is, okay, keep the bases that you got, 70 acres of corn, 70 acres of beans, 20 acres of oats, or he's got 160 acres of base total, right? He can reallocate that 50-50 to corn and beans. So he's only planted the average planting was 74.75 of each, but he will get then 80 acres of base of corn and beans. You'll always wind up with the same base acres in total. He started with 160. He ends with 160 if he reallocates. The base acres will never change in total. We're allowing you to swap acres based on the planting. Did he plant any oats in the 4 years? He did not. So guess what? If he reallocate, oats is gone. He didn't plant oats. It has nothing to do with the amount of the acres planted specifically. It's all about the amount that's planted in proportion to the total planted in that 4-year base period. If he had planted 1 acre of corn in 2009 and nothing else for corn in any year, and then planted 1 acre of soybeans in any one of those 4 years, what was his reallocation percentage be? 50%. He's planted the exact same amount. The average, see, would be 0.25 acres for the 4-year period for both crops. Your reallocation percentage is 50-50, and even though he only planted 1 acre of corn and 1 acre of beans in that whole time, he could get 160 acres. The reallocation percentage would be the same, 80 acres of corn, 80 acres of beans. How could that be any simpler, right? Just remember, this is an all-in, all-out decision. You either keep the base or you reallocate based on the percentage that's up there. Let's just say that he planted, let's say that he planted 20 acres of corn each year, 20 acres of beans each year, but then he also planted 20 acres of sunflowers each year. Is sunflowers a covered commodity? It is. All right, so now you got 3 crops up there, but now you got a third. If you planted that same amount each year of each crop, what would your reallocation percentage be? 33%, right? Everybody, you getting onto this? You see what I'm saying? So he says, well, that's great. You know, that's great, but I really don't want those sunflowers. I want to keep the base, but I really want to reallocate to this corn and beans, but just drop that sunflowers out of there. You can't do it. It is what it is. He either keeps the base he's got or he reallocates based on the planting that occurred in that 4-year period. You can't do any other shuffling. All right. Now, the second example then, just maybe to help demonstrate this a little more. You got another farm, you got corn base and you got bean base, very typical. It's approximately the same. He's got corn planted every year. He's got alfalfa planted every year. Is alfalfa a covered commodity? It is not. Does that change things? Oh yeah. So now you only got 1 covered commodity. Here's your bases would go on the spreadsheet over there on the far left. He's got 74.7 acres of corn, 74.8 acres of soybeans. What's the only covered commodity that he's got planted? Corn. You stick that on the spreadsheet. Guess what? If you've only got 1 covered commodity planted, what would its reallocation percentage always be? 100%. Now, he's only got 74.5 acres planted though on average. Is that all the base he can get? It's not how much you plant, it's the reallocation percentage. He can either keep the corn and the beans that he's got, or he's got 149.5 acres of total base. He can swap out and he would have, if he wants to reallocate, take 149.5 acres of corn base. All right, so which is better? Is it better to have corn than soybeans? I don't have a clue. I don't know. That's a great question. When would you know? 2019. All right? But when are you going to have to make that decision? Right now. So you're going to get locked into these decisions on reallocation basis. Very important to understand this is a one-time shot.
We can't, I thought you said we could change it in 2018. No?
Right, 2008, the question is, can we change in 2018? Of course, we don't know what's coming for Farm Bill. This Farm Bill runs through 2018. So the next Farm Bill, hopefully, would be in effect for 2019, right? But who knows, these farm bills can also be extended. So we really can't say when this would end, potentially. Farm bills could be extended. Okay, so hopefully everybody kind of understands that reallocation. Let's talk now a little bit about the yield options. You can retain your current yield, or you can build, you can certify, you can prove new yields based on what you've actually produced on an average 2008 through 2012. Did anybody understand that I thought you ought to probably prove yields? Everybody kind of get that point already? Very important. I strongly recommend that. So you're going to potentially look at you don't have to update it. If your current yield, your countercyclical yield is more than your proven yield, you can keep it. That decision is made crop by crop on a farm. So if you can prove a higher corn yield, but the soybean yield you currently got would be higher than the one you could prove the corn, and then keep the soybeans. Crop by crop decision on whether or not you want to update yield, crop by crop, farm by farm. All right, substitute yield, just going to mention this. There's also a spreadsheet and tools to use on our website where you can go in and put your yields in and see what your current yields are and do a comparison to see what could be. It's a great tool. You want to do that. But if some of your yields are lower, maybe in that 2008 through 2012 you planted the crop and you're only going to use the years where you do plant the crop. Okay, but some of those years weren't great. There's a substitute yield. 75% of your county yield can be substituted in. That's a floor. So if you've had poor yield, you can use the substitute yield. If you don't know what your yield was that year, maybe somebody else farmed it. What years are we looking at? 08 through 12. Maybe you didn't farm it all those years. We still, if the crop was planted, we've got to use it in that average. You don't have those records. Somebody else farmed it in 2008. We're going to put the substitute yield in for any year that the crop was planted where you don't have access or don't want to give us production records. We'll automatically use this substitute yield. All right, and those yields are, again, available on our website. You can use them when you plug into these tools. All right, farm yield below the substitute, you can use it, or if you don't have access to the production records, use the substitute yield. Owners and anybody can provide these yields. All right, you may own a farm but have multiple operators or tenants on the farm, farming individually. You may have to pool that information to come up with these yields. We're going to ask you to supply the information, just a certification on a form. The owner, though, in the end, the owner of the farm will be the one that signs indicating which crops he wants to update yields on. He will also, the owner on the farm, make the decision whether or not they want to reallocate bases or keep the bases that they have. The owner makes that decision. All right, we're not going to keep production records. This is going to be such a huge job. I've already told you, everybody needs to do this. We don't have the space, the time, anything to keep all these production records. There's a form that's going to be used. Somebody, and it can come from anybody, is going to tell us what that average yield is 08 through 12 that the crop was planted. All right, if the crop wasn't planted a year, there's no yield. It's dropped out of the average. If you only plant the crop 3 of the 5, you add up the 3 yields and divide by 3. It's a simple average of the years the crop was planted. But anyway, you're going to fill the form out, we're going to take it, and we're going to load it. But it is then subject to spot check, but you don't give us the production records at the time you're making these certifications. All right, acceptable records. RMA is the big one. That's the one we're pushing. And just because of the simplicity, now I'm not saying RMA records always match FSA farm numbers, and that's not always an easy information, but it's the most readily available, and RMA yield information is acceptable to us, and we'll use it, and there's a lot of it out there. Actually, we may even be able to get downloads and supply RMA, your RMA yield information to you, hopefully, so you don't necessarily have to go to agents or your own paperwork. That's not a known, that's not 100%, but that's what's planned. Other things, though, you may not have crop insurance. All right, you can use other records. If you've been in the acre program, maybe, those records count because you were required to turn in production for those. You may just have settlement sheets, scale tickets, any of those kind of things can be acceptable production records, but you gotta have them. You're just gonna certify, but you may get spot checked 2 years from now and say, okay, you certified, let's see your records. You need to make sure you can back up the certifications that you make. All right, let's look at yield real quick, an example. That's usually the best way to get the points across here. This producer has planted corn all 5 years. It's important to understand that if he hadn't planted the crop for any of those 5 years, you wouldn't have any entries in this table. You're only going to include the years where he plants the crop on that FSA farm number. So, he certified this to us. This isn't information we provided. He's told us what his yields are. You might notice in 2012, it's a he only made 75 bushel, had a bad year. What is the substitute yield for that county? 98. Because it's higher than his low yield, it will replace the 75. If he'd have told us, well, you know, something happened and I've lost those records and I really don't know what my yield was in 2012, we've done the same thing. We'd have put the substitute yield in. So, you're going to take, because he planted all 5 years, you're going to take those years. Well, I'll mention here, that substitute yield now, that's 75% of your county yield. And on the website, there's a place specifically labeled substitute yield. The yields there have already had the 75% applied to them. That would be the substitute yield to use. Here, with a 98 bushel substitute, what would that actual county yield have been? I believe about 130. Take 130 times 75%, that's where the 98 would come from. So anyway, the 98 gets laid in there, you're going to add those up, you're going to divide by 5, that gets you 150 bushel. Is that the yield he gets? Close, but that's not the final answer. Again, got to use some more factors, right? Got to have factors. 90% of that is what he's going to get for a yield. So, 135 bushel, that's still pretty good though, isn't it? What's the guy's counter-cyclical? What is his current corn yield? It's up there, 96 bushel. So I'm not a math major necessarily. I don't claim to be an expert, but I'm thinking 135 is better than 96, right? And no reason not to take the higher yield. That yield is only used, like I said, if the guy's in the PLC option. But does that mean he shouldn't update his yield even if he decides not to go PLC? Update that yield. Number one, you need it so you can do a fair comparison between the options. You won't know what your PLC result is if you don't know what that yield could be. Number two, even if you don't use it, you want the bigger yield in your back pocket. That's going to be sitting there potentially for the next farm bill. Okay, let's take one more real quick. This average county yield is 75 bushel, different county. Each county would have their own based on the county yield. So, 75 bushel county yield, or substitute yield, what do you think that county yield was? 100. Right? 100 times 75%. 75 then becomes your average, your plug yield, your substitute. The current CC yield is 89 bushel. That's typical in a lot of counties. You run these numbers, now this example is showing you here, 2008, he didn't have corn planted. Are you going to include that year in your average? It's gone. Everybody understand that? If you're filling out these worksheets, if you don't have the crop planted in any of the years, you don't include that year. Now, planted 2009, we've got a record, we got a crop report. He had corn planted. The guy's saying, you know, I don't have records. Maybe somebody else farmed it in 2009. The guy said, I don't know what the yield was. Is he out of luck? No, we're just gonna lay that substitute in. 75 bushel goes in there. So now you're gonna add the 75 plus the other 3 years, which are actual yields, get the total times, divided by 4, not 5, because you only got 4 years being used. You got 95 bushel. Is that the yield he gets? No, you got 90% times that, 86. Now, tell me, would this guy want to update his corn yield? No. Does he have to? Doesn't have to. What about if he had a bean yield there, his old countercyclical bean yield 35, and he can prove 50? Can he prove his soybeans and then leave the corn alone? Absolutely. This is done crop by farm. You don't have to do all crops. Do the crops where you can get the better yield. Now, update decision. I think I mentioned it, but it's going to be the owner. On the base reallocation and yields, the owner is the one in the end that makes these decisions and actually signs a document. Is that decision then can be made when? Up to when? February 27th. That's the drop dead. You need to have it done by then. If it's not done by then, the farm will be stuck, not stuck, maybe that would be the option anyway, but the farm will just keep the old base and the old yield. You haven't violated anything, you're still in the ball game, but up until that deadline, if you go past the deadline, you would lose your option to reallocate and update yield. You can still participate, but it's going to be just your only option, old bases, old yield, okay? The owner makes that decision. That's the current owner on the farm. I own my farm. I kind of think I know what I'm going to do, but I'd sell it January 1. And I sell it to Derek. He's the new owner. 2015, February 2nd, Groundhog Day, he walks in the office and says, I'm the new owner, I want to update, reallocate bases and yields. Can he do that? He is at that point in time the current owner. Now, who's the eligible producer for 2014? Who had the crops in 2014? That was me. Who gets to sign up for 2014? That would be me. Daryl gets to sign up for 2015. Now though, do I get a say in the base reallocation and yield process? I don't, because I sold the farm. I'm stuck with what Daryl decides to do. I'm along for the ride at that point. So just understand, the current owner who walks in the door at the time these decisions are made is who makes them, but that's not necessarily who the eligible producer is to be paid in 2014. We're signing up 2 years now at the same time. Everybody clear? All right. People don't always play nice. All right, people don't always get along. And you can have multiple owners on the same farm, right? You got siblings, they inherit a farm, you got 5 of them out there, they fight like cat and dog. They all want to do something different. Guess what? If there's some disagreement, any one of them can come in and sign. We just need one owner to make that decision. He's certifying that all the owners on the farm are in agreement. He comes in and does that. The next day, his sibling, his brother walks in the door and says, no, that's not what we want to do. We want to do this. All right, we're stopping right there. And we're not going to approve anything until they come to an agreement. If they don't agree, what's going to happen? They're going to get stuck with the bases and the yields that are on their farm right now. If all the owners can't come to an agreement, if there's a disagreement and then they can't come to an agreement, then there's not going to be any reallocation or updating the yield. All farmers or all the owners on the farm have to agree. We're not going to go ask them all. Any one of them can come in and sign. But if we find out that there's a disagreement, that's when we stop. Right. The second step, remember, we're doing this as steps. First step was reallocation and yield. Second step is the election of these options. It's gonna start November 17th. That's really coming up pretty quick now, right? It's gonna run through the middle of the end of March. Remember, the first option and the second option kind of lap over there a little bit. Now, this is a 5-year election. I think I made that pretty clear. This is a one-time shot. The reallocation of yield bases, or billing yield, reallocation of bases, and then the election, all right, which the election is whether or not you're gonna go ARC County, ARC IC, or PLC. That's a one-time shot. That decision is gonna be made by the end of March, and then you're locked into that through the life of the Farm Bill, through at least 2018. Price loss coverage, price driven only. Remember we mentioned those reference prices? The only thing that drives that is if the price, the marketing year average price, drops below that reference price. ARC County, county only. Has nothing to do with your own record. The PLC in the ARC County, there's no requirement to plant a crop. Those two are paid on the bases on the farm, not what you plant. So I'm gonna mention this right now. If you own a grass farm, but it would have base, maybe base rolled over from 20 years ago, but you're sitting there with base, bedding grass, you got no intention to plant it. You can still enroll. You can sign up. You can go on PLC or ARC County because you've got a base. And those are triggered on the base, not what you plant. So even if you don't plant a crop, a single cover commodity through 2018, you still want to sign up. You can get paid. Now, at the same time, I'm going to tell you, if you are on a grass farm with no intention to plant but you got base, do not sign up ARC IC. You have to plant a crop to be paid under ARC individual coverage. It's based on the crops that you plant. If you don't plant a covered commodity, you're not going to get paid. Yes, sir?
So if I got 200 acres of base and I farm 300 acres, the ARC individual is the only one that's going to pay me on the whole 300, right? If there is a loss.
In the example, you've got 200 acres of base and you got 300 acres of cropland out there, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to crop, you plan on cropping each year through 2018, or not?
All of it.
All of it, okay. So you can participate, really, you're free, you need to evaluate all 3 programs, okay? The first, ARC County, ARC, and PLC are gonna get paid on the bases on the farm, 85% of the base, actually. If you've got, though, that farm is pretty susceptible to risk, you may wanna go ARC IC, just as an example, but you would wanna run the worksheets, compare each of them. If you're gonna plant covered commodities, all 3 options are open to you, and you wanna evaluate the information. The one you want to stay away from is where the whole farm is in grass and you're not going to plant anything. You don't want to go ARC IC.
But my question was, the individual, you could get a payment on up to the 300 acres of PCB cropland, not just your base acres. The other ones are only based on your base acres, correct?
Well,
If the,
right, all 3 are paid as a percentage of the base acres. So, good question, I'm sorry, I didn't get it all the first time. The ARC County and PLC, the maximum you can get paid on is 85% of the base, but they're paid on the base crops, not on the crops that are planted. On the ARC IC, okay, you have to plant the crop, but there is a cap on the total number of acres that can be paid. It's only 65% of the total base. It actually doesn't pay as well. So on a 300-acre farm with 200 acres of base, you plant all 300 acres. But there's only 200 acres of base. Under ARC IC, the maximum acreage you could get paid on would be 130 acres, which is 65% of the 200.
I got another additional question there. I got one farm where my landowner, I'm a tenant, the landowner has more base than he has tillable acres, DCP cropland. So can he actually can he register for a PLC or an ARC county for his portion of it? He retains the grass.
Right.
I have the crop land.
Right. The farm, in these situations, you're gonna have share situations. Maybe you may have 100% interest in the cropland that you farm. I don't know, it may be a share rental or cash rent. But the owner's got other acres, he's got base acres over and above what's being cropped that you have an interest in. That's handled really by the shares on the contract. Now again, the owner is gonna make the decision on base reallocation and yield. All interested producers have to come to an agreement on this election option. So you and he would agree on the farm which of the three options would be best for that farm. Now again, you can mix crops, but see, the share situation is going to be handled by the shares on the contract, just like we have in the past under the direct payments.
But there'll only be one ARC PLC election for that farm.
For that farm, you guys will have to agree, that's crop by crop if you're doing PLC in ARC County. If you decide to go ARC IC, individual coverage, every crop on the farm is under ARC IC. Okay, great question. Yes, sir. Okay, on the question is under ARC IC, the individual coverage, I said you have to plant the crops. The question is preventive planting, how does that weigh in? Preventive planting does not count as a planted acre for the guarantee that's going to be computed, and we're going to talk a little bit more. The only exception is if 100% of the farm is preventive planting, and I'm talking about every crop. If 100% of it, then the preventive planting is used to compute the guarantee. Okay, let's keep going again. I'm the one that's going to get everybody way behind here. But our county PLC, it's done by farm, by crop. I think everybody understands that. You can pick those. You can have one crop Arc County, one crop PLC on the same farm. Okay, that's done crop by farm. Now, if you go ARC IC, which is individual coverage, every crop on that farm gets thrown in. It all is under ARC IC. You got no options to use ARC County or PLC on that same farm. Not only that, but under ARC IC, not only all crops on that farm go in, but if you sign up ARC IC on another farm, all those acres go in the same bucket. That's what we're calling the bucket. If you have multiple farms in ARC IC, they're going to count. Remember, under ARC IC, the crops that you plant is what counts. It's not the base acres there. It's the crops you plant. If I've got 3 farms, I don't have to put all of them in ARC IC. I can put one farm in. Now, all the crops on that farm is going to have to be in ARC IC, but I can put the other farms in PLC or ARC County. Doesn't make any difference. All right, but let's say I put the second farm in. I got 3 farms, I put the second farm in. Now I got 2 farms in ARC IC. Now all the crops on that farm are in ARC IC, and the 2 farms go together. That's done by state. If I've got 5 farms in the state, I've got a farm in Harrison County, I've got a farm in Boone County, I've got a farm in Callaway and a couple more. If I put all those farms in ARC IC, every crop on every farm goes together to see if you've got a loss. It's a revenue loss. Now, if I've got real good production on one farm and I had a wipeout on another farm, that good production is going to count against me. It all goes in the same bucket. Just like on one, let's say if I just put one farm in, under ARC IC, all crops get thrown in. So on one farm I go ARC IC, I got a great corn crop, but my soybean crop got destroyed. The production and the revenue from the corn is going to count against the soybeans. It's one total guarantee and one total revenue under ARC IC. All right, again, current producers, I mentioned this, the owner makes the option for PLC, or for the base reallocation and yield, right? What about these election options? ARC County, ARC IC, PLC, who did I say makes that? Everybody on the farm. Everybody that shares in the crops and the risk in the crops have to agree. Now, I say they have to agree. Do they really have to agree? People don't always get along, remember? If they don't agree, if they can't come to an agreement, that farm will be in PLC. It defaults, if a decision isn't made by the end of March, it's in PLC. Now, there's another little penalty involved as well. Not only are you stuck with, well, I say that, you're not stuck with PLC either. Maybe that's the best option. Anyway, that's the only option you got. But the penalty comes in, that farm will not be eligible to be enrolled for 2014. I'm talking about sign up now. You can sign it up 2015. What option are you in? PLC. Now, I'm talking about where they didn't agree. Stuck where you default to PLC, but the penalty is you can't sign up or be approved for 2014. Does 2014 look like it may pay based on low yield? Do you want to be in this program in 2014? Absolutely. I would strongly suggest everybody hugs and makes up, because you want to be in this program and get your 2014 payment. Can't guarantee it, but very, very likely. All right, current producer, just again, kind of like we were talking about the owner, who's out there right now? And we're transitioning between years, so that can be a little tricky as well. Definition is the people that's sharing the crop and sharing the risk of producing the crop. On the price loss coverage, it's price driven only. It's driven by reference prices that we're going to look at. You get paid at 85% of the base. Under PLC, what crop do you get paid on? Is it the base or the crop you plant? Base. All right, has nothing to do with the crop you plant. We're going to look at your base acres. If the price for that crop, your base acres, drops below the reference price, you get paid. That is done crop by crop. They stand apart. Corn is computed separately from soybeans, okay? Now, here's those prices. I keep throwing those out. Corn $3.70, milo was $3.95, wheat's $5.50, beans $8.40. All right, they're up there. That's your yardstick right there. Is that a good option for you? That's what the other people can tell you. They can run them through these tools they got, potentially tell you where these programs can pay at based on their projections on price or your projections on price. But you want to get that information. All right, so that reference price is really the column you want to look at. These other ones are just saying that's the maximum. There's a floor to this thing, is the national loan rate. For example, corn, the national loan rate's $1.95. That sets the maximum. The difference between the loan rate and the reference price is $1.75. If corn dropped to $1.50, we would still only pay $1.75, even though you've got $2.20 difference. Okay? The loan rates establish a floor. Now, our county, you're going to compute a guarantee, and that can be a very involved process, but it's based on historical yield for that county. Then we're going to look at what the actual revenue is for the county, not for your farm. And each year we're going to determine if the county had a revenue loss. Remember, it's price and yield driven, but it's based on the county. You got two guys out there farming side by side. The road goes right between them. Both of them got a 100-acre corn base. Both of them go in our county. They both thought that was the best option. The guy on the west side of the road made 200 bushel corn. The guy on the east side of the road made 50 bushel corn. Why, I don't know, but that's what they made. Huge difference in production. They're both in our county. In 2015, if corn averages 3.5, what was our reference? Not the reference price. The guarantee is computed based on the marketing year average and the county's actual yield. So a guarantee is established if the county's actual revenue in 2015 drops below that guarantee by $20 an acre. What do you think? One guy made 200 bushel, the other guy made 50. Are they going to get the same payment? They're going to get the exact same payment. So just keep in mind that county coverage got nothing to do with what you grow. It's gonna be paid on the bases on the farm, not what they planted. In my example, both of them had a 100-acre corn base, and corn went below the county guarantee. So that's your payment. You get paid on 85% of the base. All right, here's that's the calculation. It's Olympic average on prior years for the county. It's always gonna be the 5 previous years, so that's what we're looking at. It's Olympic. We're gonna take the yields and the marketing year prices that were applicable to each year. An Olympic means you're dropping the highest and the lowest. You're gonna take the 3 that's left and average them. That is then the guarantee, the revenue, historical revenue, your guarantee is 86% of that. So then if the actual revenue is below each for the next year, it would trigger a payment. That's that calculation. Olympic averages, there are plug yields, 70% of the T yield, that's an insurance yield, it's in the actuarial documents. So it's there. If a county's yields are very low in any one year, we're going to substitute in 70% of T to establish that guarantee. All right, ARC-IC. Now, you got to plant the crop. The only exception is 100% preventive planting. Individual coverage, that means you're going to turn in actual production records for the previous 5 years. If you've got them. If you don't, we're going to plug in some county yields. You're going to come up with your own guarantee based on what you've actually grown in your own yields. Then each year, you're going to turn in that year's production, and again, your production, to see if your actual revenue, your bushels times the marketing year average, add them all up. All the crops go in the same bucket from all the farms that you're in ARC-IC in. All of them go in the same bucket. If in total you've got a loss, if in total your actual revenue is below the guarantee that was established, you get a payment based on your planted acres, not the base, but the acres you planted, the crops that you planted. And then that payment's made. It's regardless then of county yield or the price. It's a total revenue loss based on your own operation, kind of similar to crop insurance. The big thing to remember, and this is taken into account when you run the different tools and have university help, factory help in doing this, the payment is only at 65% of the total base. All right, quick example. I got a 100-acre farm. It's only got 20 acres of base. I'm planting 100 acres every year. It's a 100-acre tract. I pour some grass, different things. I'm planting 100 acres on that 100-acre farm. I got 20 acres of base. What would be the maximum amount of acres I could be paid on under ARC-IC? 13, right? 65% of my 20-acre base. Is that a good guarantee? If I'm planting 100 acres and my protection is 13 acres, is ARC-IC probably a very good option for me? No. A good option is really a high-risk farm. It may not be a good option at all, I don't know, but a better option would be a higher-risk farm that's subject to losses outside county, but then it has a high percentage of base when you look at the acres that are being planted to crops. You've got to have a higher amount of base in comparison to your plant. What about if I got a 20-acre farm, same 100 acres, 20-acre base, and I'm only planting 20 acres? Does that improve the odds of taking ARC-IC? Yes, because now my bases are similar. I can get 13 acres of protection planting 20. So that's a better deal. ARC-IC requirements, you got to plant a crop. Do not take ARC-IC if you're on a grass farm with no covered commodity plant. Production reports are required every year. You got to tell us what your revenue is. We don't care what you sell it for, but you got to turn in your production. The price will be determined on this marketing year average. All 3 of the options, ARC County, ARC-IC, PLC, are paid based on the 12-month marketing year average price after harvest. 2014, are prices good? They are not good. Okay, prices, payments may be triggered under any of the 3 options. I don't know. That's a decision you'll have to make. When do you think is the earliest that any payments would be made under any of the 3 options? 12-month marketing year price average is what drives this. for 2014 crops, October of 15 would be the first opportunity to be paid, a year after harvest. When do you think 2015 payments could be made? October of 2016. This is all a year behind. Now, that's not necessarily a good thing, but that's what it is. It's based on this 12-month marking. When you sign up in these programs, are any of these payments guaranteed? No. That's what you got to keep in mind. I'm telling you, well, payments a year from now, you may not get a payment at all. Do you want that payment? You prefer to have the high prices and the high yield, but you don't have the high prices. Now do you want that payment? Absolutely. You want the payment as risk protection. Okay? This is all about insurance. It's insurance, it covers your risk. You want the money whenever it's paid, if you need it. All right, PNC enrollment, I already mentioned that this is done in steps. You got the first step, which was the reallocation of bases and yield. Then you got the second step, which is election. The last step is enrollment, which is sign up. You got to do that one every year. This first time we're going to do 14 and 15 together. We're going to talk here about planting and harvesting. We're about done, guys. I'm going to bring up a couple things. If anybody in the room plants fruits or vegetables, make sure you talk to your county office. Every year, make sure what you're doing is okay. There's restrictions. There is a change with the new Farm Bill, though, that now it's not a violation, not some big violation, contract violation that would knock you out. It's just an acre for acre reduction, but just, I want to tell you, if you're planting fruit and vegetables, or if you have somebody else come on your farm planting fruit and vegetables, visit with your local county office and make sure that the numbers will work for you. Payments. 12 months after harvest. I mentioned that a number of times. Make sure you understand that you may need help now. You may need help next spring when you're trying to get financing to put your 2015 crop in. Payments for 14 won't be made till next fall, if they're made at all. Power of attorneys, if they're out there, we can still use them if they're marked as all actions, all future and current programs and all actions, if those are on file. Remember, I said owners make the decision, right, on base reallocation and yield. If the tenant has a power of attorney form filled out this way, they can sign for the owner, or vice versa. So just remember, power of attorneys are in play out there if they're filled out this way. Here's the rules that are still applicable, basically unchanged as far as actively engaged. You got to be a bona fide farmer to get these payments. All right, you got to be out there for a reason. We're going to look at actively engaged and cash rent tenant. Remember, when you come in the office, you got to fill out all that paperwork. You know, your financing and capital, and do you own your own equipment or do you lease it? Do you own the land or rent it? We're going to still have you fill out that same paperwork. Those same rules apply. One of the big changes is adjusted gross income. That actually now has gone down. It's a $900,000 flat rate. If you're in excess of that, you're not eligible to be paid on $900,000. That's a good problem to have, I guess. I don't know. I've never had it. But if you're making more than $900,000, you wouldn't be eligible. That's an average of prior year's IRS records on AGI. The big change is payment limitation, $125,000. Before direct payments, the limit was $40,000. This looks like good news, right? Remember, before our payments were basically $20, $30 an acre. The potential for these payments, and again, this is money you don't want, and you know, unless we've had some hard times and you want it. But these payments may be $30, $40, $50, $60, $70 an acre or more. It can amount to a lot of money. The payment limitations have been increased. Each producer can draw $125,000 under these programs. One thing though, they now have thrown some price support programs in with that limit. But just be aware the limit is no longer that old $40,000 limit that we did have. Okay. I visited about that website, www.fsa.usda.gov. Write it down, go there, great tools, great information to have. This is information you want. There's links there to these factory tools. You can go, put your information in. It'll give you results, what they think it ought to be. Again, FSA will supply you with this type of information. And it's good information to have, but we can't tell you what the best option is. We don't know. These are decisions that you're gonna have to make. So bear with us. We're gonna do our best to roll this out there. Appreciate the time I've had with you today. I'll be around. I again got you behind. I probably can't take questions right now. Catch me at break or at lunch or whenever. I'll try to visit with you. Thank you very much.
So I feel like Ned Yost